Welcome back to the Crash Course Podcast. My name is Craig Crash Collins, joined as always by Brandon Scott, otherwise known as B. Scott. A lot to get to on the podcast tonight. We're going to recap Super Bowl 55. Brady gets his seventh. What did we tell you? As soon as we picked, all Chiefs, you could pretty much take it to the bank that the Buccaneers would win. We'll talk about that game there. We'll also talk about the NFL offseason, more specifically for the Indianapolis Colts. We'll also talk about Peyton Manning going to the Hall of Fame, as well as the return of NCAA football. So a lot to get to tonight, B. Scott.
Yeah, it's a packed show, a variety show tonight, more so than it has been as of late. That's a good sign.
Yeah, there's a lot to get to, so let's go ahead and get right to it here. Of course, Super Bowl 55 is in the books. Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are world champions, so it kind of rounds out this 2020 sports year of, it's 2-2, Tampa Bay and LA. LA won the NBA Finals and the World Series, and Tampa Bay wins the NFL and NHL. So those two cities are very, very hot in the sports world right now. So to recap the Super Bowl, the Buccaneers led 7-3 after the first quarter. The second quarter is really where the game changed. There were two Buccaneers touchdown drives in this quarter, and here's where we'll get to it, I think, more in the once we get through the entire recap. But this is where kind of some questionable things went here and there for the refs as far as that's concerned. First Buccaneers touchdown drive, you have a Tyrann Mathieu interception that's called back due to defensive holding. The Bucs then, their drive ends up pattering out. End up lining up for a field goal, but the Chiefs line up offside, so that gives the Buccaneers a first down. They end up turning that into the second touchdown between Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski. Then on the second Buccaneers touchdown drive of the quarter, there was a pass interference call on a deep ball to Mike Evans, a pass interference call that was on a pass out of the back of the end zone. That, of course, leads to a 1-yard touchdown connection between Tom Brady and Antonio Brown. And at the half, it's 21-16 Tampa Bay. Leonard Fournette puts the game pretty much on ice in the third quarter. A touchdown run by him makes it 28-9. Buccaneers hold on to win 31-9. Tom Brady is your MVP, 201 yards and 3 touchdowns. Patrick Mahomes ends up with 270 yards and 2 interceptions. Of course, that's he's thrown 4 interceptions in his postseason career, all 4 coming in the Super Bowl. He was just basically on the run. I saw a tweet that he ran a total of like 495 yards or something the entire 497 as far as like just being chased around. It seemed like he was under duress the entire night. And he did connect a lot with Travis Kelce, 10 receptions and 133 yards, I believe, for Kelce. Tyreek Hill wasn't nearly as much of a factor as he was the first meeting. There was also 10 hits on Patrick Mahomes and 3 sacks. We talked about, the fact that Mahomes could potentially get sacked, a number of times because they were missing so much talent on the offensive line. And there you have it. I mean, the Buccaneers get the Super Bowl win. Kansas City, just looked completely out of their element.
Yeah, they did. I mean, they looked like they just felt like they could walk in there and just do whatever they wanted. And when Tampa Bay didn't just roll over and play dead for them, because, I guess Tampa Bay didn't care that they were the Kansas City Chiefs and they were supposed to be the newest dynasty, and that threw Kansas City for a loop. They actually had to fight, and I don't know. They were just totally off. Now, it doesn't help when it seems like the refs are in the back pocket of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I mean, some of those flags, let's be honest, were they really calls that should have been made? You know that you are making a difference in the game when the halftime crew starts talking about how the officials need to keep the laundry in their pocket.
Yeah.
And stop, I don't know. It was just weird. Like that pass interference call in the end zone involving Mike Evans, that ball was not catchable at all. I mean, I don't think even Calvin Johnson, who was superhuman, would have even been able to catch that ball. That was way over his head. I mean, totally uncatchable. So it was just things like that just continued to happen. And then because of that, it got into the heads of the Kansas City Chiefs defense, and they started getting chippy. And I don't know. Overall, I think I would rate this Super Bowl maybe like a 4 out of 10.
That's fair.
I'll be honest. I told you a few minutes into the second half, I turned it off and I was like, you know what? I value my sleep over forcing myself to watch this entire game.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. And, I tweeted about it, after the first half. It's like, look, Kansas City played terribly. They didn't play very well at all. Obviously, they really missed, having their 2 starting offensive tackles. Obviously, those are really, important positions on the offensive line when you're trying to control an edge rush like the Buccaneers have with Shaq Barrett and all those guys. So, it makes sense that there was a lot of issues in that regard. And Kansas City, stat-wise, you look at the stats after the game, and it doesn't look awful, but it definitely, a lot of those stats were made also in garbage time when, the Chiefs were just trying their darndest to get back in the game, and they just couldn't do it. But yeah, I think the penalties, going back to the penalties, I'm not going to blame... I'm not going to say that the refs were trying to hand Tom Brady another Super Bowl, so, for whatever reason, or, they were in the back pockets of Tampa Bay. I mean, Kansas City put themselves in some really bad positions. They, obviously don't, I don't know if I necessarily, agree with the unnecessary roughness call. It was a little chippy on both sides. I feel like both sides kind of instigated it. But then again, Chris Jones shouldn't, slap, the offensive lineman on the helmet. The first pass interference call or first holding call with Mike Evans, I mean, I guess you can call it holding, but there was some definite hand fighting on both sides. And I think at the end of the day, it's just the fact that all the 50-50 calls were going Tampa Bay's way. So it's, because there are calls on the other side where, you could make the case that Tampa Bay was holding as well, and they weren't called. I look at this game, I was thinking about it earlier today. This win for Tampa Bay and the loss for Kansas City kind of reminds me of the NFC Championship game, where Green Bay 100% lost themselves the football game, but then there were some just, that 1 or 2 questionable calls that you're just like, well, I mean, you didn't need to give them that a little bit of help. It was fine. The game, Tampa Bay played well enough to win without having those 50-50 calls go their way. But it just seemed like every single call went their way. You're absolutely right. That pass out of the back of the end zone, way too high for anybody to catch it. And the one that bothered me kind of the most was the one where they threw pass interference, and it was basically Mike Evans and the defender tripping over each other. Wasn't super egregious. The Super Bowl should not be determined by the referees, and I feel like the calls that the referees made definitely took the wind out of the sails of Kansas City, because I mean, heck, they hold them to. They had just made that big defensive stand. Earlier in the game, they got the ball back. Tampa Bay was driving again. I mean, you take some of those calls away, it's a closer game at the half. Maybe it's a little bit different in the second half. But I think that definitely, while Kansas City, again, didn't play good enough to win, you can't make the argument that those calls didn't take the wind out of their sails, didn't, completely, take away their momentum, because any momentum they had, I mean, because what are they supposed to do? At the end of the day, what are they supposed to do when literally any time they get close to a receiver, there's a penalty thrown? So, again...
And if those penalties on their defense did nothing to keep their offense out of the end zone.
Right.
I mean, you got to realize their offense did not cross the goal line a single time.
Right.
All game. So.
Yeah. So, I mean, so like I said, I mean, it's one of those things where it's just it just kind of stinks that the referees had that much of an impact. But at the end of the day, I mean, hats off to the Tampa Bay defense. I mean, if you could give Tom Brady, you win your 7th Super Bowl, you throw for 200 yards, you get 3 touchdowns, you're going to get the MVP. But, I mean, I don't know who you would have given it to on the defense, and I know you can't give it to the entire defensive unit. But they were the real MVP of that Super Bowl because, like you said, they kept Kansas City out of the end zone, which you don't see really at all. With that Kansas City team, they forced 3 field goals, which no matter what happens on the other side, I mean, you can't kick 3 field goals, in the when you're driving down and expect that to, because honestly, it's not like they were not executing in the red zone and they were chip shot field goals. I mean, Kansas City a lot of times wasn't even getting close. You also have drop passes by like your sure-handed guys like Kelsey and Hill. So like that didn't help them either. And so the defense of Tampa Bay is the real MVP of the Super Bowl because they played outstandingly well and they did what they had to do.
What's nice is that when you look at this Super Bowl, it really kind of shows you what the Colts really need to become a legitimate Super Bowl contender. And because everybody goes, oh man, if the Colts had Tom Brady, we would have been right there. Yeah, we may have been, but you look at what Tampa Bay was able to do and how they were able to do it, you just realize that, hey, the Colts really, this is what they still really need to be able to take that next step to be a true legitimate Super Bowl contender.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there it is, the Super Bowl. It's in the books now. Of course, we got to see, I think at the end of the day too, we got to see something truly, I don't really know what like you could compare it to otherwise. I mean, this would be like if you saw Michael Jordan and LeBron James. It'd be like if Michael Jordan
that's what I said prior to the game. I was talking to my dad and I said, this is like Michael Jordan and LeBron James going at it.
Right. It'd be like if Michael Jordan was on that one of those Spurs teams, like when LeBron was young and on the Cavaliers and Michael Jordan's on the Spurs, with Duncan and Ginobili and all of them, and where it wouldn't be completely it wouldn't be won completely by Michael Jordan, but you'd look back and you'd be like, man, those are basically the torch getting passed. And I mean, the one thing I didn't like about that whole narrative was the fact that, like, after the game, Tony Romo was like, well, I mean, if it was 6-2, in terms of Brady and Mahomes, then Mahomes might catch him, and but now that it's 7-1, I don't know if it's going to be caught. Like, I don't think 7 Super Bowls or even 6 is going to be close, but I mean, Patrick Mahomes is still going to be in plenty more Super Bowls and going to lead the Chiefs to at least 1 or 2 more. You at least would like to think.
You don't want to take anything at all away from Brady because we now realize it was Tom Brady, not Bill Belichick. And Tom Brady now has more Super Bowl rings, more Super Bowl wins than any franchise in the NFL.
Yeah, that's incredible.
That is unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally insane. And the thing is that, like, I wouldn't be surprised to see him back there next year. Like, I wouldn't be surprised. Because if you think about it, the NFC... Because when Tom Brady was with the Patriots in the AFC, I mean, you had Manning to go through. And he had all of their numbers, but he still had to go through, Manning and Roethlisberger and Rivers and all those guys. Whereas, I mean, you still have to go through, like, Aaron Rodgers, but, like, who else in the NFC are you really scared of? I mean, the teams at the top... the Saints, aren't going to have Drew Brees anymore. They're going to be trying to figure it out between Jameis and Taysom Hill. You would like to presume. You've got, obviously you've got Rodgers there. You've got, you got Russell Wilson. But in the Seahawks, although they haven't really been the same team really in the last few years. At least when it's mattered. So I mean, it wouldn't shock me to see them, the Buccaneers, back in the Super Bowl next year.
I think we got to look at this as seriously one of Brady's best Super Bowl runs because to get there, he had to go through Drew Brees. He had to go through MVP Aaron Rodgers. He had to go through Patrick Mahomes.
Right.
I mean, when you look at the quarterbacks that he had to go through, it's probably the best raw lineup of quarterbacks that he's ever had to go against in a playoff run.
Right.
I mean, like you said, when he was with the Patriots, there was maybe one quarterback that was worthy of the challenge, Peyton Manning or, Patrick Mahomes in the past, or, but never had, when you look back, I mean, maybe Ben Roethlisberger, but still, this is probably the toughest gauntlet that he's had to go through to get there. Now, what concerns me for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going forward is that, yes, they do have some cap issues and they are going to lose some guys. More importantly, like Shaq Barrett may not be back with them. Offensive lineman Joel Haeg, former Indianapolis Colt, he could be a potential returnee to the Colts. He only signed a 1-year deal with them down there in Tampa Bay. So they're going to have some decisions to make down there to keep this thing together. I mean, because they have a lot of guys on 1-2-year contracts, and they have a lot of young, talented guys that are needing those extensions. So how do they go about that, keeping the band together? Does anybody walk away in retirement? I mean, obviously, Tom Brady's going to play till the day he dies because he moved down there because he got closer to the fountain of youth, it seems like. And, I mean, seriously, I mean, it just seems like he's getting younger. He's like doing a Benjamin Button on us or something.
Yeah, it's truly remarkable, and I mean, heck, I wouldn't be surprised to see this same matchup in the Super Bowl next year. Like, to be honest, I don't know that it'll happen, but I mean, you know, these two quarterbacks are just so talented, and yeah, it'll be interesting to see, you know, and we'll get into the offseason. That's like actually a good segue, you know, talk about what the Bucs can do in the offseason. We're gonna transition into offseason talk ourselves, but first, let's get to our friends of the show. The Crash Course Podcast is brought to you by Anchor. Looking to start a podcast but don't know where to start? Look no further than Anchor.fm. Anchor allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your computer or mobile device, and will distribute it to other sites such as Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. On a budget, not only is Anchor completely free of charge, but will allow you to make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor.fm to get started. Anchor, it's everything you need in a podcast in one place.
Are you tired of your same old lunch hour of sitting and scrolling through your apps on your smartphone? Have you thought about playing a board game with your coworkers? Eat Lunch and Board Game is a podcast dedicated to telling you about board games that are great for lunchtime fun and some that are probably better saved for after work hours. I've been playing games at my office for over 4 years now, where I have made new friends and business connections that have been very useful. Board games build.
We've got Dusty up in the chat. He says, "Can I get my 4 hours back from that Super Bowl?" Yeah, that's kind of what we were saying. The Bucs absolutely dominated. Thanks for hanging out, Dusty. It does remind us that you can watch us every week, twitch.tv/3Z Media. And you can also follow us on Facebook, Crash Course Podcast. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Crash Course Podcast. The MCT Podcast is coming out as our YouTube exclusive show this week, this Saturday, so make sure you're locked into that. You can follow us on Twitter at Crash Course FM, and remember, you can listen every week on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever podcasts can be heard, you can hear the Crash Course Podcast. So let's go ahead now, and you alluded to it, B. Scott, what the Buccaneers can do in the offseason. Let's just talk about the offseason in general. The Indianapolis Colts have a lot of question marks. I mean, you'd like to think like, oh, we're, next year's going to be, same type of team, same type of situation. They're going to be in prime position to, have a good run, and they very well could. But there are a lot of things that hang in the balance right now for the Indianapolis Colts, some of which we've already touched on. We won't spend a whole lot of time talking about the quarterback situation, but that's still something that is out there, and there have been some developments. Number one, of course, my choice for who is going to be on the Colts is off the board. Matthew Stafford, he's traded away. The Rams trade a 2022 and first-round pick, a 2023 first-round pick, and their third-round pick this season, along with Jared Goff, to the Lions for Matthew Stafford, which that's an insane trade. I think that makes the Rams. I don't know if it puts them, it's definitely an upgrade at the quarterback position. So if they can, keep that talent around them, keep that, defense looking pretty good, I think they kind of move into second, depending on, behind the Seahawks, depending on what the Cardinals and 49ers can do. That division is still insanely good. So I think this is a big improvement for the Rams and helps them keep up with the Russell Wilsons and Kyler Murrays of the world.
I will tell you, the pressure is now really going to be on Matthew Stafford. It's either put up or shut up time for him. He's always had that excuse to fall back on. Well, he plays for the Detroit Lions. They don't have a good team. But now that he's on a team that is only a few seasons removed from making a run at the Super Bowl, having a Defensive Player of the Year, such a strong defense, a good group of receivers. he doesn't have an excuse anymore. Now, obviously, it is a very tough division, but nonetheless, it's going to be some high pressure for him. He just can't kind of walk into the season and, do whatever you want, do his best, because you got to go out there and try to win every Sunday.
And you consider what the Rams gave up for him too. That's a little bit of added pressure. Which at the end of the day, I'm glad the Colts didn't have to give up that much to go out and get him, or like didn't have to give up that to go get him, because I don't know that I would want him for that steep of a price. But yeah, it's gonna be go time for the Rams and Matthew Stafford.
You know what the Lions initially asked the Rams for in the trade?
They asked Aaron Donald, right?
Yeah, they wanted Aaron Donald, and
right.
The Rams said, no way. We're not giving you Aaron Donald, but we'll give you a king's ransom of draft picks.
Right. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, that would have been insane. But also that, it makes sense. Ask for who you're going to ask for, but I think that would have been one step forward and two steps back if they would have lost to Aaron Donald.
You start high.
Right,
why
absolutely.
Not? Go for it.
And then, of course, we've talked about Carson Wentz. He's expected to be traded, and the Eagles do want a Stafford-like package in return. And it's rumored that the Bears...
That's funny.
It's rumored that the Bears and the Colts are interested, and I will say this, B. Scott, that if there's a team that would put out a Stafford-like, package to the Eagles for Wentz, it would be the Bears, who gave up basically, who set their franchise back however many years by, selling the farm to go get Mitchell Trubisky. So
know what's funny? You know who would potentially be included in a Bears trade package if people have put out articles saying this is what a potential trade package from the
that would just be
Foles 3 years removed essentially from being with the 2 or 3 years removed from being with the Eagles
and leading them to the Super Bowl.
And he's back as potentially their starting quarterback again.
Yeah, that would be...
I mean, what are the odds?
You can't escape it. The gravitational pull of Philadelphia to Nick Foles is just immense because he was there.
Oh, yeah. Then
he was gone. He went to the Rams, and then he came back, and then he was gone, and then now he's going to come back. That would be absolutely insane. And then I was reading a fan-sided article that said, basically listed off 5 quarterback scenarios, which did include Wentz, as well as Sam Darnold, Matt Ryan, Mac Jones, and Jacoby Brissett. Which, Sam Darnold, I don't know that I want Sam Darnold. I mean, I know he's been with a terrible franchise in the Jets, but I don't know. Again, it's kind of like with. It's kind of like the same thing where, if they went with, Brissett or Eason, where it's the Colts are in win now, try to contend for a Super Bowl mode, and that's not a move you make when you're in that situation to go out and get a Sam Darnold who hasn't really done much. Because, heck, you've seen quarterbacks. Look at, for instance.
The Jets think they're they need to make a change at quarterback to make them a better team.
Right. Well, and also,
and it's if Sam Darnold's as good as everybody says he is, why do the Jets need to make a change at quarterback?
Well, so the Jets were playing for the first round, for the first overall pick this year, and obviously they won out of it. But the team that had it last year, the first overall pick, was the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, you would venture to say that, there's talent on the Bengals, just like there's some talent on the Jets. I would take Joe Burrow over Sam Darnold. Joe Burrow had the Bengals in contention to win games, was playing very well, whereas Sam Darnold, not so much, and in a weaker division. So, I just don't know that I'd want Sam Darnold. We talked about Carson Wentz. Matt Ryan, okay.
Matt Ryan's another stopgap.
Yeah, and I've heard that the Falcons don't really want to trade him. Now, if they want to throw in Julio Jones as well,
you would have to give up a king's ransom.
I know, but I'm just saying, I'll take Matt Ryan if they throw in Julio too.
If they don't want to trade Matt Ryan, there's no way in hell they're going to trade Matt Ryan and Julio Jones.
Right. And then Mac Jones, again, not really, big question mark, and then Jacoby Brissett.
No. Jacoby Brissett's going back with the Patriots.
Well, that's not a bad take.
I honestly think he's going to end up.
Right. So, thoughts on the updated quarterback situation? I'm kind of back on the Wentz train, and here's why. So his last season with Reich as the offensive coordinator, 60% completion percentage. He threw for 3,200 yards, almost 3,300, 33 touchdowns, which is his highest amount of touchdowns he threw. That was his basically would have won the MVP had he not gotten hurt. He had his career low in interceptions. He's thrown 7 interceptions, which is tied for his career low in 3 straight years. And the Eagles had the best offensive line in football that year. His 2 best years in terms of yardage, 2 of his best years with yardage came with Reich. He threw for 4,000 in 2019, but other than that, his 2 best years were with Reich as the offensive coordinator. The Colts had the 7th best offensive line in football coming off of 2020. And so, you put Wentz with his old offensive coordinator where he's had the most success. You put him with a better offensive line than what the Eagles had with, kind of a dumpster fire. And I think you put him in a much better situation. And Ballard, we've seen him be a draft wizard. I think he can move around to give the Eagles a Stafford-esque deal without actually giving them a Stafford-esque deal. I could see them throwing in a player or 2 to kind of ease the draft capital you have to give up. I could see him being like, hey, we're not going to, the Rams are making the Lions wait until next year's draft to get a first-round pick. We'll give you our first-round pick, which he did last year to get DeForest Buckner. We'll give you, 2022, we'll give you a 3rd-round pick, and in 2023, we'll give you a 4th-round pick, or something of that matter, a 2nd round. I could see him being able to kind of finagle the losses to not be so much that it's going to be that bad. Because the Colts, that's the problem. The Colts, one, don't have a quarterback to send the Eagles in return to lighten the load, and they also they have a lot of needs they need to address, and they're probably going to do that through the draft. So they don't want to give up a lot of capital, but then they're going to have to get a quarterback that I think is competent enough and skilled enough to take them to where they want to be in 2021. So it's really a big pickle. But if it's not Wentz, though, I'm just going to trust Chris Ballard and throw in the towel and trust the process, because I honestly don't know. I don't know if it's not Wentz. We could toss around some of the crazier names like the Deshaun Watsons and the Aaron Rodgers and the Dak Prescotts, some of those wild situations. But at the end of the day, if it's not Wentz, I don't know who it is. I really don't, and I don't know.
It's going to end up being either Jacoby Brissett or Jacob Brissett.
Probably.
Let's just be honest.
Yeah.
I think the best case scenario is they use some of their draft capital, which is not ideal, to try to move up into the draft and try to, especially if a guy like Justin Fields starts to fall, which I don't see that happening, but if it does, or a Zach Wilson, which I don't think – I could see Justin Fields falling before I see Zach Wilson falling. But if that begins to happen, I could see them trying to move up and taking a Justin Fields, because that does allow you then to still be able to have better cap space, because you have a quarterback then on a rookie deal. But I'll tell you what, the thing that makes this situation so difficult is the Anthony Costanzo retirement. Had the Colts not lost their starting quarterback and their starting left tackle to retirement at the same time, they can make the necessary moves to shore up either position. But by losing both, it's really putting them in a tough spot, because as we saw in the Super Bowl, if you do not have a solid left tackle, like the Chiefs were without their starting left tackle, it puts a lot of pressure on your quarterback. That's a very tough position to try to fill. And I know people are like, well, we could just bump Quentin Nelson over. Do you really want to lose his full skill set at guard to put him at tackle? He's not as good of a – he'd be a good tackle, but he's not as good of a tackle as he is a guard. He's a great guard.
Right.
So I don't want to bump him over.
I think people like to think that the offensive line is kind of like the outfield in baseball, where it's like, oh, just put them in left field or right field or center. It's like, no, there's very different.
Especially when you get to the pros.
Right.
When you get to the pros.
Right.
And
so it's not like, because you could do that. You see that a lot of times in college where they move them over from guard to tackle and that kind of thing. But yeah, it's very different.
It's a huge difference to go from interior line to the outside. It's a big difference, and
yeah,
I mean that's why you see them graded out differently even in the draft. They're tackles and they're guards, or outside line, inside line. And, it's a big difference. Now, if you wanted to bump your center out to guard, that you can see that happening more so. But I mean, that's why I brought up Joel Haeg. Because Joe Haeg is a guy that they could bring in on a cheaper deal that he could play left tackle for them. And I would be confident in that because he knows the scheme. He's been there before, and I'd be comfortable with that. But even then, you let him walk for a reason. You didn't re-sign him when you could have. And are you really that willing to pass up an opportunity? Because this year, it is a draft of riches when it comes to left tackles at where the Colts are picking in the first round. Do you really want to pass up that opportunity, to lose that opportunity to draft your future left tackle of the future? I mean, pretty much every name outside of Sine Powell is going to be there. And, I mean, obviously, it's a big gap between him and everybody else, but it's not that big. It's just because everybody else is so needy for quarterbacks or wide receivers or anything else this year that these really talented tackles are going to drop to the Colts. And do you really want to lose out on your first-round pick to try to trade for a Carson Wentz who potentially who has a likelihood of being a bust? I don't know. I do not know. Whereas if Anthony Costanzo decided to still continue to play, yeah, maybe you take that risk, But now with having to fill both of these positions, and these are cornerstone positions on the offense. I mean, obviously quarterback, duh, but left tackle is one. That's why you never see left tackles really move in free agency. I mean, this year there might be a chance because there's some teams that are really cap needy that are going to have to not be able to re-sign somebody. So there's going to be options out there like a Trent Williams or a Alejandro Villanueva. I mean, there's going to be options there, but they're a little bit older. They're going to be a little bit more expensive than saying a Sam Cosmi or Christian Darrisaw or an Alex Leatherwood. Any of those options are going to be really good options based off of the rookie contract, and they'll be around for a lot longer. So it really makes for a tough offseason because it's like, well, if we go this route, we lose out on all of this. And if we decide not to go this route, we may not get our quarterback. And so, I don't know. It's going to be a very tough offseason for the Colts.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, and plus, they've got other needs that they want to address as well beyond just offensive tackle and quarterback. I mean, some of the needs that are listed are, they still want to shore up the defensive line, edge rusher. They also want to make sure they can get some more help in the secondary. And then, I mean, you look at the free agents on the list that are, going to need to either be re-signed or could potentially walk. You've got T.Y. Hilton, Justin Houston, Xavier Rhodes, Anthony Walker, Danico Autry, T.J. Carey, Marlon Mack, Malik Hooker, and Trey Burton. And so there's a lot of guys that are going to be kind of roaming around out there. And so the question is, who would you most like to see re-signed both on the offense and defense? For me, it's Marlon Mack. For the offense, he's going to come back on a 1-year prove-it deal. I'm fairly confident he's going to come back on a 1-year prove-it deal, just because. Obviously the injury, he was going into free agency this year. Obviously, he had the injury. Running backs aren't really super highly valued anyway, and I don't know that he would get maybe as good of a deal if he just decided to walk. I think on a 1-year deal he could get paid to be kind of the guy with Jonathan Taylor, and that would be a very good tandem to have. He'd be another weapon in that backfield to help out the Colts. So I really want to see him come back on that deal. basically have a great year. And then, obviously he'll probably be gone after that 1-year deal, but I think I'm confident in that happening. Close second for me is Trey Burton, too. I want to see Trey Burton back as well. And then as far as the defense is concerned, Xavier Rhodes. He solidifies the secondary. He had a great year. And you've seen injuries, with, Malik Hooker, some of those guys in that secondary. Rocky Sin hasn't really played well to this point. So those are some of the guys that, I think the Colts need to go out and re-sign, but at that same time, there's still a lot of guys there's a lot of guys on that list that I want to bring back.
So for me, yeah, I think Marlon Mack will ultimately end up being back just because 2 years in a row of having injury issues, not a lot of teams are going to try to go after him, so the Colts can bring him back and can offer him that. But it's going to be a much more diminished role considering how much better Jonathan Taylor played as the year went on, how Naheem Hines was really good. Ultimately, the Colts may just say, oh, sorry, there's just no room in the end. When I look at, though, the free agents on offense, it's got to be T.Y. Hilton, mostly because a veteran presence in the wide receiver room would be really good. And the other one that you do not have on the list, Zach Pascal. I think Zach Pascal is probably more along the lines of a need to come back. And the way it's sounding is he will be back, but a much bigger need to come back because he is a younger wide receiver and he has played very well for the Colts these last few years. He keeps getting better and better. So that's a big one. Defensively, it comes down to two players for me. Really, I wish all of them. Justin Houston, I feel like could get more money out on the open market, but is somebody willing to pay him that much? I don't know. He would be one that would come back. I think the two that are the biggest names that they need to do whatever they can to bring back are Xavier Rhodes and TJ Carey, because that is one of the weakest positions right now for the Colts is the corner position. Xavier Rhodes played a great season. There's talk that he may follow the cornerbacks coach to Philadelphia, which would be a great pickup for them. TJ Carey is a great depth piece. How many times did he step up big time late in games and have a key tackle or a key interception or a pass breakup? He wasn't a starter by any stretch of the imagination, but he was one of those guys that was just a solid player. Danico Autry, I'm back and forth on him, and then same with Justin Houston. I would really like to see Justin Houston come back. So I feel like then if you bring you really focus on bringing back some of these defensive players, that does give you more options then going into the draft saying, hey, we don't really necessarily need to spend a third-round pick on a pass rusher. We can use that to move up, or we can use that in a trade package. I think trying to look at bringing some of your own back is a big deal. Now, I've seen trade packages involving players like Bobby Okereke. So if you were to throw him into a trade package, and obviously you'd want to bring Anthony Walker back, he's the one that I wish they would bring back because he is such a solid player. Obviously, he doesn't have the same athleticism as Bobby Okereke, but man, just to see somebody starting and playing so well from Northwestern, he was a guy that was a thorn in the sides of anybody in the Big Ten, and see him playing well with the Colts. I like those kinds of stories, and you hate to see the Colts have to walk away from a player that's been such a strong leader for so many years in that locker room.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to play a game real quick. It's instead of hot or cold, we're going to play draft, sign, trade. If you have ever played the game Bang, Marry, Kill, this is the same kind of concept. We're going to tell you, we're going to take kind of those three big needs, offensive tackle, edge rush, cornerback, and kind of tell you, because we're going to go rule the quarterback situation kind of out of the equation for right now. because we've already discussed a lot of the people they could sign or could trade for or could draft also. So we'll go ahead and tell you who we think they should, what position they should address in the draft, what addition they should try to make via free agency, and who they should try to trade for. So as far as who I think they should draft, I think offensive tackle is the way for them to go. There are 12 offensive tackles in the top 100. As far as prospects go, the Colts have 3 picks in the top 100. You could go ahead and, with your first pick, you could address that with Alex Leatherwood from Alabama or Liam Eichenberg. You could tap that Notre Dame well, like you did with Quentin Nelson. If the Colts still have their first rounder, which is 21st overall. The guy I predicted the Colts to get is Dylan Radens out of North Dakota State. He's a big dude, 6'5", 300 pounds, allowed 0 sacks in 2019, which is pretty impressive. I don't think there wasn't an FCS season this year for college football, was there? Yeah, so that's why there's no numbers on him from last year. I thought so, but then
there was, but
wasn't there one game?
Yeah.
It was really weird.
Yeah, it was weird. I know there was no championship.
Right. So, the Colts can still go get a quality offensive tackle, if they don't have their first pick. So I think that's something that the Colts can address in the draft, and they don't necessarily have to do it with their first overall pick. So if they need to try and trade, to get a quarterback, or try and trade, to move up in the first round to draft a quarterback, they can still get a quality offensive tackle, later on in the draft, because right now Radens is projected to go, somewhere around, the third round, something like that. The Colts could get him. As far as who I think they should sign, I'm going to say they should sign an edge rusher. They should go out and get Ryan Kerrigan. The Washington defensive line is loaded with talent. So they don't really have a spot for Kerrigan because they've gone out and got the Chase Youngs of the world. Kerrigan's a player who averages 10 sacks per season. DeForest Buckner led the team with 9.5 last season. So, if Kerrigan even gets close to that, he'll be, at the top of the list as far as getting sacks is concerned. He's not super young. He's in his 30s, but he's not, on the tail end of his career either. He is a 4-time Pro Bowler, so I think, to bring Ryan Kerrigan back home, have him, get an opportunity to play for the Indianapolis Colts, put him on that defensive line, I think that would be a big get for the Colts to go out and get. And as far as trading is concerned, I think they should trade for a corner. I don't really know who's out there to trade for, so really the only guy that was listed that I could find was Stefan Gilmore. The Patriots tried to shop him last year at the trade deadline. They wanted a first-round pick. He would be a 1-year rental, but it would be kind of that stopgap situation to get you to next year when where your needs can be addressed a little bit more easily. You won't necessarily have so many needs because you'll be addressing, your offensive tackle and your quarterback and all that stuff. It shouldn't be as a stressful and crazy offseason as this offseason, because you will have hopefully, somewhat of a plan at quarterback. You will have drafted your next offensive tackle to replace Anthony Costanzo. So, you'll have your line shored up maybe a little bit better on the defensive side. So you can go out and get a cornerback like Stefan Gilmore on a 1-year rental. The Pats do want a draft pick. You could trade your first rounder for him. That's what the Patriots wanted at the deadline. But tight end is also a need for the Patriots. So you could also trade Jack Doyle and like a third rounder to the Patriots for Stefan Gilmore. We've seen the Patriots want to get rid of, players sooner rather than later. So, at the end of the day, if you don't get a first rounder for them, they might be good with like a second or third rounder and a player in return for that, especially if the Colts can go out and re-sign Trey Burton. That makes that a little bit easier as well. Draft an offensive tackle, sign a edge rusher, Ryan Kerrigan would be awesome, and then trade for a corner to address that need.
So, kind of a fun fact. Anytime that there's a quarterback coming out of the FCS from North Dakota State, it's going to be drafted up high, he always has a really solid offensive lineman that's coming with him. Carson Wentz, Joe Haeg. Potentially a reunion of Carson Wentz and Joe Haeg here in Indianapolis. That's a potential. But I do like the drafting of Dylan Radens from North Dakota State because you can get him later. And because of that, the Colts could actually use their first round pick, second round pick, or whatever they need to do to move up and draft his quarterback from North Dakota State, Trey Lance. Option.
That is an option.
Trey Lance is very much considered to be a almost like a Patrick Mahomes type player. Maybe not on the same level, but similar traits. Kind of like a Jordan Love, which everybody wanted the Colts to draft last year. Sign, I'm right there with the Ryan Kerrigan signing. I'm not sure who else is out there right now free agency wise. I mean, I guess for now you could go Dak Prescott because he's not officially franchise tagged or anything. But Ryan Kerrigan would be a great fit, mostly because he is getting up there. He's getting older. He's not old by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, he's my age, and I guess we talk about how old I am. But Ryan Kerrigan would be a good fit because Ryan Kerrigan played linebacker most of his time with Washington. While he was at Purdue, though, he was a D end. And now that he's getting older, coverage skills just aren't there. Coverage skills were never really there for him to begin with. That's not his bread and butter. So, I mean, he still had a very successful career in Washington being a linebacker. But being able to come to Indianapolis, be closer to home, and be able to put his hand back in the dirt or the carpet here in Indy, that would be a really good move for him. And I could really honestly see that happening with just how close he is to his home. So that would be one I would look at as well. I'm not sure who else is out there because I haven't really looked at it too much beyond quarterback because that's such a big deal right now. Mm-hmm. The other name that keeps popping up for the Colts at edge is Bud Dupree from Pittsburgh. He's going to be available. Just trying to think who else is out there free. I mean, everybody wants. The other big one. If they don't go defense signing wise, look for them to try to potentially sign. If they don't bring back T.Y. Hilton, but Curtis Samuel, a wide receiver from Carolina. He's a much younger T.Y. Hilton prototype, and he just needs a change of scenery. I mean, he's a very, very talented player. I mean, this is a guy that single-handedly carried Ohio State to a victory over Michigan a few years ago. He's only 24 years old. He'll still come cheap because he hasn't put up great numbers in Carolina, but Carolina's really kind of struggled all across the board.
He had a couple of big games here and there. But...
he did. I mean, but they struggle at quarterback.
Yeah.
So, of course, not like the Colts have a quarterback right now. But that would be a guy that if the Colts decide not to re-sign T.Y., they could get a cheaper option with Curtis Samuel. I'm actually more for them signing Curtis Samuel than re-signing T.Y. Hilton, to be honest. Trade? I don't know. I mean, Matt Ryan. I mean, I don't feel like they're gonna trade for a 1-year rental. They're gonna give too much away for a 1-year rental in Stefan Gilmore.
A third, let's say they preserve their first or second round pick.
If they can be guaranteed that he would sign an extension with them.
See, I don't even because let's say you lose Xavier Rhodes.
They would try to trade for him at the deadline. They're not going to try to trade for somebody like that in the offseason.
Right. Well, the Patriots wanted a first rounder for Stefan Gilmore at last year's deadline. So that obviously because he's still on the Patriots, the entire league passed on that. So they know they're not going to be able to get a first rounder. The Colts could, depending on what they do at quarterback, because I mean that's really honestly the first domino to fall, and will be the first domino.
Left tackle.
Right. So, but I mean more or less quarterback though, because if they come out and they say, you know what, we've decided we've re-signed Jacoby Brissett, he will back up Jacob Eason. Well, at that point,
it would be the opposite way.
Well,
I hate to tell you, but it would be opposite.
Well, I mean, yeah, whichever way it would be, because I could honestly see it being either way. I could see them saying, well, you know what, we drafted Eason, it's a little sooner than we wanted it to be, but he's going to be our future anyway, let's just go ahead and see. And we have Brissett, who has been better as in that backup role than he has been as a starter. Or I could also see them do that, where they're like, hey, Jacoby Brissett, we know what we have with him. It's not always super great with him, But I still contend that Jacoby Brissett, like, you know, has been thrown into some really bad situations and then was injured the second half of the season that he got his second opportunity to start. So
well, let's just put it this way: if it is Jacoby Brissett, the Colts will go out and they'll probably re-sign Marlon Mack. They'll try to re-sign T.Y. Hilton, and they'll sign Curtis Samuel, and they're going to hope that Paris Campbell's healthy because they're not going to be able to throw the ball deep too often. So they're going to need these athletic guys to get in there and make plays on their own. So look, even a player for the Colts, they could trade back if they wanted to and say, hey, we'll sign Joe Haig or we'll sign Trent Williams or Andre Villanueva at left tackle. We'll trade out of the first round, pick up some more draft capital, and early in the second round, take a guy like Rondale Moore that can create his own space and create plays on his own. Because if you're going to bring back Brissett and have him be your starter, you need those playmakers that can create for themselves rather than just stretch the field.
Right.
And that's the types of players that you're going to see with Curtis Samuel, Rondale Moore, and T.Y. Hilton.
But once that quarterback, you know, once the shoe drops on the quarterback situation, then that's when we'll know kind of where they're at. And I think if trading for Stefan Gilmore, I mean, I'm not calling for it to happen by any means. It's just kind of like, hey, here's a guy that's been, you know, thrown around in a lot of rumors. So I needed a guy to fill out the outline on the podcast, so I chose Gilmore. I'm not sitting here clamoring for him to come to the Colts. It'd be a nice addition. It'd be a nice pickup, especially because, if I'm going
to trade for anybody, I'm going to trade for J.J. Watt.
You'd be giving up a lot more than you'd be giving up for Stefan Gilmore.
Yeah, but
and J.J. Watt's been way more injured. I'm not saying I don't want J.J. Watt.
I don't know.
I do.
I don't see the Colts trading for anybody other than a quarterback at this point or a left tackle. I don't see them trying to go and fill the corner need with a trade. But at the same time, we never thought they would make a trade for like a guy like a DeForest Buckner.
Right.
And they did.
Because if let's say Xavier Rhodes leaves to go to Philadelphia, and then, you know, let's say the Colts decide, hey, we're going to, you know, we're keeping our quarterback situation in-house, then that frees you up to go get, you know, with all the needs that you have, you can then go out and say, okay, we're going to kind of delay the cornerback need one more year, go out and get Stefan Gilmore for a 1-year rental. If he signs, great. If he doesn't, he helped us. He's still a very capable corner that helped us kind of get to that next season where their offensive tackle situation is fixed. Their quarterback situation is fixed. You know, you would like to think anyway. So that's where that would kind of make the most sense to trade for a guy like Stefan Gilmore.
Yeah. I see where you're coming from with it.
But speaking of the Colts quarterback situation, the guy who obviously, you know, spoiled us rotten as far as the quarterback situation is concerned, got inducted into the Hall of Fame. That, of course, is Peyton Manning. This is first time on the ballot, right? First ballot Hall of Famer? Right. Mm-hmm. So he is finally in the Hall of Fame. I mean, you know, pulling up the good old Wikipedia page here. I mean, obviously, you know, no-brainer. Going into the Hall of Fame. The only thing that kind of stunk about the announcement was he was in Denver instead of in Indianapolis, but you know what, it's going to happen. 2-time Super Bowl champion, Super Bowl MVP, 5-time most valuable player. You know, he's got, you know, almost 10,000 yards. You know, he's completed 65% of his passes, 539 touchdowns. That's pass attempts. He's got 71,000 yards, 96.5 passer rating, which is like just a notch above what we had this year in Phillip Rivers. I mean, dude was, you know, like I said, spoiled us rotten because we, you know, as Colts fans have this expectation to go to the playoffs every year, and Peyton Manning was front and center with that whole you know, situation, you know, getting us hyped up every year to go to the playoffs and be successful. You know, it's a no-brainer. There's not a whole lot to react here because it's not like it's a controversial induction. But at the same time, it's cool to see, you know, it finally happened. Hey, we can always say that Peyton Manning was in the Hall of Fame before Tom Brady. That's one thing that I'm going to hang my hat on.
Because Tom Brady's
right,
not eligible yet.
Exactly. But he's still first, dang it. I'll take it. I will take it. He beat Tom Brady finally. But no, so it was cool to see him finally get kind of that, extra recognition. Obviously you got, statues of him. He's going to be in the Hall of Fame. Really excited to see him actually get inducted. And, we as Colts fans were spoiled to have one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, be in Indianapolis.
What's funny is that there's going to be so many players from that team and that era of the Colts that are going to be enshrined. I mean, we've already seen Tony Dungy. We've already seen Marvin Harrison. Now we've seen Peyton Manning. I mean, look how many were potentially on the ballot this year alone. Peyton Manning, Reggie Wayne, Edgerrin James. I wasn't too surprised that Peyton Manning was a first ballot Hall of Famer. Let's just be honest. There wasn't much. I mean, when if you see the announcement video, he wasn't surprised at all. When he's shooting that promo for his show on ESPN Plus, and all of a sudden, the outcomes of walking a lot of his former coaches, he knew. Yeah. He knew. It was like some of these reactions you see from guys are just legitimately surprised or happy. He knew. The sheriff knew. Let's be honest. There was no sneaking up on him.
Right.
But honestly, I mean, because of that, I was more in tune to wanting to see how Reggie Wayne was going to do. Because I was like, well, Peyton's a foregone conclusion. He's first. He's in. I mean, let's just be honest. He's in. But I think Reggie will get his time. He'll get in. He's not a first ballot guy, but he'll get in the next couple of years. For me, looking back on Peyton's career, I mean, there's just so many things that you think about that we just took for granted, obviously. But, I mean, obviously the 2006 AFC Championship game at the RCA Dome, that's a big one. Some personal ones. I was in the stands for essentially Peyton's last game with the Colts, that AFC divisional round, I think it was, wild card round.
Yeah. Against
the Jets. The Colts lost, and little did we know that would be the last time we'd see Peyton Manning in a Colts uniform, truly, because the next year he was out the entire year with the neck injury. Or I would maybe even say back when I was a sophomore in high school, they used to do, I don't know if they still do, but I was a Riley kid, Riley Children's Hospital, and you could get nominated. You could sign up to be nominated as a Riley Kid of the Game, and I got selected. So myself, my dad, and two of my friends, we got to go to the game, and I got to go be a part of the coin toss. And, Bill Brooks, the old Colts wide receiver, Bill Brooks, pushed my wheelchair out to the 50-yard line for the coin toss. And I got to meet Peyton Manning then. But, I think the bigger memory I have of that day was coming off the field, and they were playing the Jaguars that day, and Mark Brunell comes up behind me, grabs my shoulders and said, I was wearing a Colts jersey. He goes, "You're wearing the wrong jersey." And I froze. My dad said, "Well, you should have told him." "Well, they give me the right one." But yeah, I mean, it's just those types of things.
Why did I expect you to be screw you, Mark Brunell?
I should have. I should have been give me the right one then, I think that's probably what he was expecting.
Right.
But yeah.
Oh, that's pretty.
I wasn't surprised at all, and I'm glad Peyton got in and is in. It just solidifies what we all know about him.
Yeah, I mean, and first of all,
from what I hear, he is going in as a Colt. He is choosing to go in as a Colt.
Nice. That's good. That is great to hear. But for one, from that promo video, I don't know. I'm assuming he's the head of the Hall of Fame or whatever it is.
That big guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. He comes and he's like the president.
Right.
And he comes in and announces to everybody that gets in.
I mean, I don't know what I expected, because I've seen him do those induction induction announcements before, but dude loves football. You can just tell by the
the history of football.
Right, exactly. I was like, man, this dude is I can tell how into football this guy is, and it's refreshing to see when you see some guys are just suits in those types of situations. So it's that was really cool to see. But as far as Peyton Manning memories, you talking about being a Riley kid unlocked the memory for me that I was I remember when the Colts did a training camp for whatever reason in Muncie, at Ball State, And Peyton Manning did not practice at all. He was not like out there training. A lot of the guys were out there, signing autographs, going through some drills here and there. But Peyton Manning was not seen at all. And it wasn't until like at the very end he walks out with like, his whole entire entourage of people. He had a jersey on technically, but again, like I said, he didn't do anything. Actually, he came out, kind of like waved, and then he signed a few people's autographs, which we weren't close enough to get to him. And then he walked right back in. I was like, man, what a badass.
It's kind of like same kind of story, but he played a preseason game with the Colts up at Purdue. They played an exhibition game against the Saints, and one of the players in attendance of that game, a Purdue football player that was in attendance of that game out on the field, Drew Brees.
Wow.
That tells you how long ago Peyton played.
Right.
I mean, you got to remember, he was the number one pick. I think it was 97?
98, yeah.
So,
as far as like a memory from when he was playing, I was lucky enough to be in the stands when he broke the touchdown record the first time against the Chargers, which might have been if it was 2006, no. It was 2004, so it was probably Rivers, or was it Rivers?
2004?
When he broke, it's either Brees or Rivers, which is kind of, crazy to think about too. But either way, throws to Brandon Stokely, gets the 49th touchdown, the record-breaking one. I was in the stands for that, which was really cool. Something I'll always remember, and just one of the many Manning memories that we'll have, and I'm sure we'll.
It was Phillip Rivers.
Nice. So yeah,
it was his rookie year.
Right, I think, and that was on a touchdown, I think, to like tie the game, and the Colts eventually won too. So, a great memory there. But one of the very many memories from Peyton Manning's career in Indianapolis. So one more thing to touch on here before we wrap up the podcast. Probably the biggest news. If you've followed the storyline of our love for this particular topic through the years, now 4 years of doing the Crash Course podcast, and that would be the return of the NCAA football game. B. Scott and I have...
It came out of nowhere.
Right. Just random.
When I first saw the news, I was like, this is a joke. Somebody's joking. Like, why ESPN? What are you doing?
Someone hacked the ESPN account. Well, my thought process was like that they were refurbishing and re-releasing 14. That's what I thought. Like they had, when I first saw it, because that's the last game that came out was 14, and they used that logo in the announcement. So I was like, oh, they're refurbishing and re-release. Because hell, I'd buy if they re-released NCAA 14 on the PS4. I would be 100% there. Hell, in the meantime, while they're working on the game, because it's probably not going to be ready for a couple of years, they should just go ahead and do that. Just give us the
Fortunately, from what I'm understanding, is it's not even going to be on PS4.
Right. Well, it's because it's going to be for the next gen consoles, so it makes sense.
PS5.
Yeah. So, I
thought I heard it may be coming out in August.
Really? I've heard a lot of things be like, don't expect it, because they're still picking out their development team and still fleshing a few things out like that. So I don't know. I heard maybe that they're just saying that in the article because we really don't know when it's going to be released. They're probably just tempering everyone's expectations. Right. Honestly, it's kind of what I am worried about, honestly, because I am worried because I've gone back and forth. I'm obviously excited. Obviously, we'll be the first one to go out and buy it and all that stuff, and I'm really excited to get the opportunity to have NCAA football back because I played the heck out of that game back in the day, and I've recently gotten into playing it again a little bit more, and I've enjoyed it, and I'm like, I miss having a football game to play because I've stopped buying Madden because Madden's awful, but that's what scares me because I'm like, Madden has been absolute garbage over the last few years. They've really focused on Ultimate Team, which is what they make the most money on because it's a lot of microtransactions. They don't care about franchise mode. They don't care about creative player. They don't care about anything that isn't Ultimate Team. Franchise is awful. everything's awful besides
the story mode for your career.
Right.
Where you get forced to retire at the age of like 29.
Right. Yeah. It's just absolutely terrible. But the decline of Madden happened around the time of NCAA going away and not being, because NCAA remained popular. Like, because the last Madden game that I truly thoroughly enjoyed was Madden 16. So that would have been 2015. So that would have been 2 years after the release of NCAA 14. That was the last Madden game I truly enjoyed, and since then they've been steadily declining, where a lot of people criticize it now as being essentially just a glorified roster update. And so it makes me excited that the last time Madden was good was when college football was also, because there was kind of an internal, must have been some sort of like internal competition, between Madden and NCAA, and, because there's no other competition. There's no other football game that's out there. And now that EA Sports is reigniting that kind of competition between, hey, if people might not buy Madden, I mean, we get the money either way, as EA, but, people might not buy Madden as much now that NCAA is out. And so maybe that will cause both games to be better. But I could also see EA being like, oh, you want NCAA? Here's a, half-baked version of it. Go enjoy it. And we're going to, go buy this now from us. Now spend $120 with us every year by buying Madden and NCAA.
Right. And I always thought NCAA always had the better graphics than Madden. Like, I could never figure out why. I was like, are you serious? You're coming from the same company at the same time. And NCAA's graphics were just off the chart better than Madden. I am kind of disappointed that they're not going to put it out on PS4 because that's what I have.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like going out and spending $600, $700 or $600 on a console just for one game. Will I?
Yeah, but that's
maybe. I don't know. I'd rather buy a new house, to be honest. Let's see, priorities now. But I loved that game. I could do the original, I guess it was called Big Man on Campus. Do you remember when they first came out with that feature? You had to prioritize your time. Like, okay, I'm going to study the playbook. No, now I'm going to study for chemistry. Or you had to keep your grade. It was like an impossible story mode, but it was fun. And then they decided, okay, we're going to ditch the having to do homework deal, and we're going to have it be, you just practice, you play games, and you have to move up through, you have to earn different you earn different freedoms. Like, okay, the coach now allows you to audible. The coach now doesn't give you, just tells you what play, you get a choice, or, different things. So I liked that change. But I remember when it first came out and you were guided through each week by Aaron Andrews.
Yeah.
It was like, which path are you going to, it was like choose your own story type deal. It got old. It got tiresome real quick. Like, oh my gosh, I have to, because you actually had to take quizzes.
Right.
And it was like, I'm already in college. I don't want to have to do it when I'm trying to have fun. Like, I already got to do this in real life.
Right.
Like, let's stop. But once they got rid of that, it became a lot better. Like, you got to play through a high school season. You earned your stars. You got recruited. And at the end, you got to pick which school you wanted to attend. That was always a lot of fun. And then to be able to, I always did it over and over again to try it with different teams. But, because as time went on with that game, teams started having various uniform combinations, and you got to they actually allowed you to pick those different combinations. So obviously, if you played with Oregon, it was like endless amounts. So that game was just so much fun. I could spend hours playing that game. It was one time though, I couldn't figure out. It never happened again, but it forced all of a sudden. Usually, you got to choose. Do you want to go to the draft now, or do you want to come back? But I was a junior, and all of a sudden it just, all right, your career's done. Wait, what? It forced me to the draft. It said you're foregoing your senior season. Like,
you're good enough. Dang. You're gonna leave. We don't care about your education. You're gonna be drafted first overall.
Yeah, but I also liked how you could import or export your players from NCAA and then import them into Madden. So it kind of, you can really build almost a football universe.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, you could theoretically take, like, you could create yourself, go through, an entire high school season, get recruited, play an entire college football career, win a national championship, win a Heisman, and then go get drafted and play a whole entire career in the NFL, which is insane. You could, it was, and I would love to see that kind of same feature. Since franchise lets you do stuff with head coaches, I would like to see that same thing be used for head coaches. You could theoretically export a head coach to.
Well, look at you with dynasty mode. I mean, you're still running the same dynasty for the past 50 years.
Yeah, well, that was the number. I still love that Facebook post that I had, and I remember reading it off when we first talked about this topic on this podcast, where I played so long on NCAA 08 that because they did that cool college game day helmet, Lee Corso did the helmet at the end of the game, or at the beginning to predict. He did his headgear prediction. I was like, if I think if they had all stayed on the show and realistically in game, they were Lee Corso was 136 and Brad Nessler was 110 or something like that. It was just absolutely insane. That's how long I played that franchise.
How many national championships did you win with Kansas?
Oh, I didn't win any national championships with Kansas, but I did in 08. I won NCAA 08. I won 1 with LSU, 7 with Purdue, 4 with Oklahoma. I went all over the place.
I remember you took some time. You went to Kansas. And you were like, I'm going to turn them into a national power.
I did. I took them to bowl games. We won Big 12s. We beat Oklahoma. I had my own custom sounds on my PS4 that would play after third downs that. Lawrence was rocking, man. It was a good time to be a Kansas fan.
Your coaching career on there was just something else. I'm gonna go from this really low tiny school to a big power school, and then another power school. And then another power school. Oh, I got bored with that, so I'm going to go take a challenge on, and I'm going to go try to build up this dump of a school,
right,
and turn them into a national power.
And that's the fun of it. And that's what I hope. It's gonna. I'm sure there's gonna be some stuff that you look back on, and you're like, man, they probably don't have the capability to put that in the game anymore or whatever, and they probably won't.
But
so
why wouldn't they?
I don't know. I'm just saying, I'm trying to temper my expectations, because it's been built up. We've been waiting for this for so long that if we think oh, this game's gonna be so amazing, it's gonna shatter everything, it's gonna be awesome, and I'm sure it will be. But also, I
will tell you, the only thing you're going to see that's different is jersey numbers for current rosters are not going to match at all. So if you're playing, for instance, as a Purdue, a wide receiver you're not going to see a number 4 as your highly rated wide receiver.
Right.
You're just not.
But I can also see, because you have the ability to create customized rosters, and if they let them do that and upload it, then I'm sure that's just an easy thing that you can.
That can happen, because that's still happening. But you're not going to see the game itself put out. But if you want to take the time, if they're going to be like, hey, if you want to take the time to go in there and create it, change it all yourself, that's what you do.
Yeah.
We're not making any extra money off of that. But the game that we sell you is not going to have, we all know that number 4 that's rated as a 98 overall at wide receiver for Purdue is not just number 4. That's Rondale Moore.
Right. We know quarterback number 16 for Clemson is not, some random dude. It is Trevor Lawrence.
So it's going to be very randomized, so people are going to have to go in and do it on their own.
Yeah.
Now, you may see the type of ratings that they would give those players, Purdue's highly rated wide receiver may not look anything like Rondale Moore or be the number, but they're going to be somebody that's going to be rated highly. I could see that happening.
Oh, yeah. They're
totally randomized looks, numbers, everything.
Right. So yeah, I'm excited, especially now that there's a college football playoff, because I was watching, there's a YouTuber I watch, by the name of Not the Expert, and he does a lot of college football stuff, and you might actually enjoy this YouTube series if you get some free time, B. Scott.
If I get some free time.
Yeah, that's why I threw that in there.
This is my free time.
Right? This is the only time of the week that I have free. But no, he was talking about stuff that like he'd like to see out of the game, and like college football playoff like potential, being able to expand that to whatever you want to have it be. So if I want to have a 32 team playoff, I can have it. The ability to, have, like, I'd be excited to see what you saw in NCAA basketball games where, like, some games were on ESPN, some games were on CBS, some games were on Fox. I know for years, like, in MLB The Show, we've been clamoring for, having different broadcasters for a regional game, for a national game, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of things they could do that would be really cool, and it just worries me that, like, EA might just be like, well, here you go. You wanted a football game. Here you go. It's Madden, but college now. And so I could see them doing that, but there's a lot of potential with as far as like, you could really soup up, all the different things and bring back a great, game. I would like to see like a record book, a history book, a history, book be in the game as far as like it keeps track of your like records versus certain teams and all that kind of thing. And your, like a trophy case, that kind of thing. There's a lot of cool things they can do to make, and basically bringing back a lot of the features they already had in the game, but just making sure they're in this game. Obviously the gameplay will be a little bit different. If you go back and play NCAA 14 now, obviously it's, old and clunky and stuff like that. But, I'm really excited to see what they do. I'm just really worried that EA might not. I would like to think that EA knows that they're kind of on bad terms with the football community, but I would hope that they're like, hey, you know what? This is a good chance to like make both franchises good again.
Yeah. Yeah. So the day that came out, of course, on a lot of the NCAA accounts, like I currently am running or helping run the baseball account.
Right.
So people started talking about bring back NCAA baseball. I was like, I'm surprised people even remembered that one.
Right.
I loved that game. So, hey, we started talking about bringing back this football game, and it's finally back. So let's start talking. What's the next game we want to bring back?
I want to see NCAA basketball back. Like, because there's, like, right now, the only sports game that, I mean, I have, like, the Maddens that I bought in the past.
If anybody's going to bring it back, if anybody's going to bring that one back, it's not going to be EA. It's going to be 2K.
And I'd be 100% fine with that, yeah.
2K it really knows how to run a really good basketball game. So
the last basketball game I owned was NBA 2K18. The last Madden I bought was last year's Madden. Like, these are, like, the only game I buy, it's, year to year that's a sports game is MLB The Show, because they do the best job at, basically having so many modes that you can play, and it always feels like it's, very well thought out. Franchise is always fun. Road to the Show is fun. Diamond Dynasty is fun, and it's not, you can, like, I have my bullpen right this year, Diamond Dynasty and MLB The Show is, like, Aroldis Chapman on the Reds. I have Mariano Rivera from when he was on the Yankees. I have Eric Gagne from the year that he won the Cy Young, and I haven't spent a dime on the game this year, where you can't say the same about Madden Ultimate Team or NBA's, right. Their version of Ultimate Team. I don't know what it's called, but
my team.
My team, sure, yeah, that. But yeah, so like, I would love to see NCAA basketball come back. 2K would do an awesome job with it, because I enjoyed 2K18. After a while, there's almost so much in that game that it kind of is overwhelming. So, like, I could see them bringing that same energy to NCAA basketball, and I'd be here for it. So, like, I'd want to see.
They used to have an NCAA basketball game.
Yeah.
Because my old high school classmate was on the cover.
Yeah. Oh, hey, did you go to high school with the Portland Trailblazer?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I didn't know. I was just making sure.
I was just saying.
No, I know.
Just saying, they used to make a college.
Weird flex, B. Scott. We get it. You.
Well, we were talking about how it just popped, like that cover
right.
image popped into my head.
Right.
And I was like, oh yeah, they used to.
Yeah, because.
But if there's anybody that would make a good college game, I think it would be the brand or whatever it is that does Road to the Show, because this year in I think it's Road to the Show 21.
Yeah.
Or was it 20? It was
It's
21.
20. It's 20.
The most recent one. If you do Road to the Show, you actually start off in college.
Yeah.
And you don't play a college season, but you go to like these draft camps or something.
You play
and
so with
you can choose to like, okay, I will go to the draft, or no, I'll go back and I'll do this process again.
Right, because it is very arduous, tedious type process to go through. Because you play like scouting games, where like. You'll play for whatever region you play. There's 4 regions. You play against the other 3 regions, and then you decide if you want to be drafted. The only thing that stinks is every year you drop. So which kind of stinks.
You still manage to get drafted by the same team,
right?
The Miami Marlins.
I got drafted by the White Sox. So
I got drafted by the White Sox.
Yeah. So I'm still middling around in AAA because I haven't played Road to the Show as much because Diamond Dynasty has been so good, and I used to not play Diamond Dynasty.
Road to the Show.
But yeah, I do too. But yeah, San Diego Studios is the one that does that, and I'd be 100% down for like I said like as long as they do well with these, like if they bring them back and just they're kind of half-assed versions of what they used to be, then won't be super excited to have them back. But like if they brought back NCAA basketball, we could see baseball come back. Heck, I don't know. I mean, I know it'd be right up your alley. I don't know if it's ever happened before, but I'd be down with like some NCAA wrestling if they brought that back.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's funny. You actually see a lot of people post like covers for NCAA wrestling with some of the top NCAA wrestlers on it. So you see like Spencer Lee or Gable Steveson. People will make graphics and throw them on a cover. Every now and again. That would be a fun game. It would be a lot of fun. I think it would be a very tough game to play.
Yeah, I think to wrap it up, on that topic, like it'll be nice to see like if it's done right, like this will make sports games like as a whole like just better and good again if they can bring back some of these series because. We like I said, the only game I buy anymore. The only thing I used to play was sports games. I used to play, if it was football season, I'd play Madden. If it's baseball season, I'm playing MLB. If it's that little gap between the two, I'm playing NBA or college basketball, and that was it. And now I haven't played MLB The Show in weeks, and I off and on will play NCAA now that I have found dusted off the old PS3 and have that back. It's been a while since I've had played a lot of sports games like nonstop like I used to do, and having those back would just be really I think it would make, because a lot of these games have focused on the microtransactions, basically you bought our game, now we want more of your money so you can create your fantasy team and all that stuff, and they focus so much on that everything else has kind of gone to crap. So if you bring back some of the more pure concepts that you saw in NCAA games, I think you'll get back to having more, you will have better, games in general as far as sports are concerned.
Yeah.
Well, that will do it for this week's edition of the Crash Course Podcast. Thank you guys all for hanging out. Again, you can watch us every week, twitch.tv/3C Media. You can follow us on Twitter at Crash Course FM. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, Crash Course Podcast. Remember, the MCT podcast is coming out this Saturday. It's a YouTube exclusive, so make sure you're subscribed there. Also, go like us on Facebook, Crash Course Podcast. And remember, you can listen on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts can be heard. You can hear the Crash Course Podcast. Before we leave, B. Scott, where can they find you?
You can always find me on Twitter at Brandon_Scott87.
Well, next week we will be back with more, but until then, have a good one, everybody.